our industry for quite some time since we first learned about it. Ingenuity made its first flight on April 29th, 2021. It was only scheduled to do 5 flights and has just completed its 66th flight. So it's doing really, really well. This is the first aircraft to achieve powered controlled flight on another planet. So it's actually really similar to what the Wright brothers did here on Earth. And of course, in our own industry, Igor Sikorsky. One of the things that fascinates me is Mars' atmosphere is at 1% of ours, requiring rotor speeds of up to 10 times some of the more earthly rotorcraft. So joining us today is Theodore Tzanetos. He's the team lead for Ingenuity Mars Helicopter at NASA JPL. He graduated from MIT with a BS in Computer Science and Electrical Engineering in 2012 and a Master's of Engineering in 2013 in the same fields. Teddy has been at JPL since 2017 and is the Ingenuity Mars Helicopter team lead and is the principal investigator for Mars Science Helicopter System Research Task. He designed, prior to the launch, he designed and built the electrical ground support equipment for Ingenuity, which was used for communicating and charging the helicopter on Earth. He served as one of the flight test conductors for Mars Helicopter and led the first flight testing campaign of Ingenuity at the test facilities at JPL. And he was the assembly test and launch operations lead for the Mars Helicopter, acting as the interface between Mars 2020 and Ingenuity. If this is your first time with one of our webinars, we try to make this as interactive as possible. We're not going to have a lot of time for questions, but we want to try and get to the questions you do have. Please use the question module on your Zoom screen. We'll go ahead and chat as much as you want, but we're only going to pay attention to the question module. This webinar is being recorded. We will try and get this shared tomorrow afternoon or possibly Monday, depending on how quickly we can get things rendered and posted. So let's stop sharing this. Teddy, would you care to join us?
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me all right, Dan?
Got you loud and clear, Teddy. Hey, we really appreciate this. As I mentioned before, 5 planned missions and 66 total missions. You guys are really saving the taxpayers a ton of money and getting the most bang for the buck on this project.
Happy to hear that. We couldn't agree more, and it's been a real dream come true for all of us here on Ingenuity. Should I start off with the slides?
Yep, I'm going to mute my camera and go right ahead.
Okay. All right, is that coming through all right, Dan?
I do see it, yes.
Great. All right. Afternoon, everybody. Hope you're excited to hear a little bit about flying helicopters on another planet. I have a short presentation prepared for you today where we're going to talk primarily about Ingenuity. What have we done with our baby on Mars? And a couple of slides on the next mission opportunity for us to fly another set of helicopters, which is Mars sample return. That's actually my big focus now, is working on Mars sample return and the sample recovery helicopters, where we've taken everything we've learned from Ingenuity and now we're building the next generation. And then also I'll touch a little bit on Mars Science Hexacopter, which is a much more future forward-looking vision of larger platforms and larger fleets of things flying around Mars. Why don't we dive in? First off, have to recognize the team. Ingenuity wouldn't have been possible without these amazing people you see on our screen. On the bottom right is one of our original team photos from Ingenuity. You can see in the middle holding the mock-up of the helicopter, original chief engineer and project manager, Bob Ballard and Mimi Young. And then on the top left, you can see our extended ops demo team, and a lot of similar faces and also a lot of new faces. So suffice it to say that the team has grown since the original tech demo days. Obviously, the photos don't show that, but in terms of operations, we went from a small, little scrappy, 5-flight, 1-month ops team to now a healthy 2.5 years, more of a marathon operations team as opposed to a sprint operations team. So couldn't be prouder of these people. So what is Ingenuity Mars Helicopter? First off, before we get talking about the fun physics metrics, it's important to understand what it is in the context of the things that we send out to space, right? There are the things that, failure is not an option, right? There's human space flight efforts, that's considered Class A. Then we send rovers, which, human life is not on board, right? So it's a different risk category, different reliability category, that's Class B. There's C, there's D. D is where you get to more of the commercial off-the-shelf equipment, or more relying on industry. And then there's below there, which is called Type 2. Ingenuity is a Type 2 technology demonstrator, right? And the whole point of a technology demonstrator, I'll say tech demo from here on out, is to just prove that we can, right? Our goal was to get to Mars and prove that the math checks out, that the physics checks out, that our assumptions and our simulations and all of our testing here on Earth actually works, right? The simulations and physics is great, but at some point you got to prove it and put your boots on and actually make it happen. So that was the goal of Ingenuity, was to prove that yes, humanity can build things that can fly in the equivalent of 1% of Earth's atmosphere. There's a reason why helicopters on Earth don't fly at 100,000 feet, because the air is extremely thin, and that's the scarcity of the air that we're talking about at Mars. It's not all bad though. The gravity is 1/3 that of Earth's. It's still a bad trade if you had to choose one, right? You'd rather go with thicker air and higher gravity if you could, just because the air is almost non-existent. The makeup of an Ingenuity class helicopter, it's a coaxial counter-rotating system. So these two rotor blades you see here, they spin opposite to each other. That's why we don't have a tail rotor. It cancels out our yaw torques. That silver box underneath, for those of you who have seen marathon runners on the news or something like that, and they're always wearing those silver mylar metallized heat blankets. That's what this is. We have about 4 layers of that heat reflecting material to try and trap as much heat into our avionics enclosure as possible. You can see our 4 feet and then our solar panel and our little whip antenna on top. All told, she's incredibly lightweight. She's around 4 pounds, 1.8 kilos, and those blades spin at a shocking 2,500 RPM. If you were to take Ingenuity and try and make it fly in Earth's atmosphere, those blades would have to spin much slower, around 400 RPM, just because Earth is a thick soup of jello compared to the atmosphere on Mars, and these blades are highly optimized for that extreme Reynolds number regime. So that's what an Ingenuity is. How did we get there? We were tucked under the belly of the Perseverance rover. So here's a photo from our ATLO assembly test launch operations phase, right before launch, when everything's starting to come together and everyone's wearing those really cool bunny suits in the clean room. And you can see in the red circle, Ingenuity folded up underneath the Perseverance rover. We caught a ride to Mars with Perseverance, right? So Perseverance deployed us, and we had a brief 30 sols in which to pull off our mission, right? Perseverance has a lot of important science goals, right? And it was important that we get off of the rover as quickly as we could and started our tech demo as soon as we could to respect that timeline. And that all came down to this day right here. On April 19th of 2021, we had our first flight moment. This was our 100% mission success criteria for the Ingenuity Mars Helicopter team. You'll see a plot here on the projector. That's actually a plot of our altimeter, showing that we went up a handful of meters, stayed there, and came back down. And we also had an amazing video from the Mastcam Z instrument on Perseverance. So it was a humble flight, our first one. It was a simple one, but enough to just, prove to all the humans back here at Earth that, yep, it actually happened, right? We climbed to 3 meters, did a simple yaw rotation, stayed in flight for around 39 seconds, and then we came back down and landed. We could have called it quits there, but we didn't. Thankfully, after the first flight, we went off to our full 5 flights in our original mission timeline. And we're all extremely very thankful that Mars 2020 and NASA saw the value in keeping this tech demo going. After flight 5, we transitioned from what we originally called our tech demo phase to our extended ops demonstration phase, or operational demonstration phase. The original mission took place in these small blue shaded boxes on the right. So you can see flights 1 through 3 and 4 through 5. The amazing part is how far we've come, right? We originally said, all right, we're just gonna stay in this little tiny area, knock out the 5 flights and we'll be done. Thankfully, if the animations come through on the web correctly, that was just the beginning, and we were off to the races in terms of breaking new ground and trying longer and longer flights. We went from 30, 40, 50-meter flights. Flight 9, you can see we took a shortcut that the rover could not take for terrain reasons, and we really stretched our wings, so to speak, and flew 625 meters in about 3 minutes. The rover, for example, has to drive an entire sol. Sol is a day on Mars, an entire sol to cover that sort of distance. We can pull it off in 3 minutes. We did some interesting scouting around the yellow circles, raised ridges in flight 10, South Sita in flight 12, and you'll see some of the interesting data products there. We explored that, and then the rover team said, hey, you know what, we want to turn back around and go all the way around in a counterclockwise path here to get around this rough area to get to the river delta, right? So the northwest part of this map is the Jezero Crater's river delta. The reason Mars 2020 landed here in the first place is trying to answer some important questions. Might there be signs of extant life on the surface of Mars here? River deltas on Earth tend to be very fertile places for life, a lot of nutrients, a lot of minerals, a lot of life at deltas here on Earth. So the argument was, hey, the scientists wanted to go to a river delta on Mars because maybe the same applies, right? That's why we landed in this place to begin with. But to get from where they were in South Sita all the way to the river delta, they had to do this big counterclockwise white traced path here. And again, the helicopter team said, hey, you know what? We're not going to do that. We're going to take a shortcut. Not only because we could, but because trying to keep up with the rover when she's flooring it is a challenge for the helicopter. So it was a win-win where we could prove even more capability out of this little helicopter and try and fly further than we ever had in the past. We actually hit 704 meters in a single flight. That was flight 25, and a great surprise for the team. And then we started to climb up the delta. And you can see all these little tiny staccato flights at the base of or at the entrance of the delta climb, and then we started expanding past and made it all. This map stops at 51. We've gone to 66, but as you can imagine, keeping up with the animations in PowerPoint is a challenge. It's a good problem to have. Another thing I want to point out is this red circle area. Let me go back. This red circle area is called Three Forks. As a contingency in the event of an issue in the future, the Mars 2020 Perseverance rover deployed 10 hermetically sealed, beautiful sample tubes on the surface, right? So all along the path here, this white path, Perseverance was collecting samples to try and answer some of those science questions. And 10 of those tubes were deployed in that red circle in the area called Three Forks. We'll come back to that later about the significance, but that is the backup cache. This is our future here, right? So Ingenuity made it up to an area called Jarabi Point, and we're moving west now towards Bright Angel. We don't have too much time today, but we've been through an entire Mars year. We've survived a Martian winter. We're going into our second Mars winter, right? So there's challenges ahead of us in doing all that. I noticed that there were some questions about degradation or aging of components. We can come back to that at the end. Happy to say the baby's very healthy. The main thing that we're looking at very closely from a consumables or degradation standpoint is really just our solar panel. Our actuators are healthy, our electronics are healthy, rotor system blades, everything's looking green. Our solar panel over almost 1,000 stalls here on Mars. We're 950 something now. I need to double check that as of last count. The solar panel, we've seen about a 30% drop in output. Part of that is very fine dust accumulation, electrostatically being held to the glass cover glass. That's hard to shake off. It's very fine dust. Part of that could be just aging, cracking of cells that just normally occurs with solar panels anyway. We can't say for certain, but the good news is that we still have more than enough energy to keep flying, and the team has become very adept at planning around those evolving constraints and still being able to pull off fantastic flights and capture great images for the technology team, for the engineering team, for the science team, you name it. In summary here, Ingenuity's done a lot. We've made it through our tech demo and our South Sea Tech campaigns. We're up at the River Delta now. We've hit 66 flights, 118 minutes. We're all just shy of 2 hours of accumulated flight time. We've passed 9 miles. We've hit up to 10 meters a second, which is quite the feather in our cap here. 10 meters doesn't sound fast, but when you have a helicopter about this big zipping past over your head at 10 meters in a single second, it's actually blisteringly fast. And we've pushed our altimetry ceiling. We have a laser altimeter, and we've gone up to around 24 meters and still have had successful operation. Here's just some highlights of what you can do with helicopters at Mars that are difficult from a timeline or operational perspective to do with other assets like rovers or orbiters, right? Aircraft really nicely bridge that gap between the two. And what you can do is stereo for motion. You fly around an area and you know where your position is, and you take images of that area, and you can stitch those images together and form disparity maps or these three-dimensional animations of what's out there, which is a phenomenal tool and could be a phenomenal tool again for the future for scientists to quickly assess regions, right? If you have fleets of drones flying around on Mars, you say, hey, send all 100 out in a radial direction and then send us back down the three-dimensional maps. We'll then decide where to invest our time and resources with the complicated, science instruments and rovers of the future. This is an example of the state-of-the-art orbital imagery and resolution that you can get with the orbiters at Mars. And then if you project the helicopter's airborne imagery onto that same surface, you can really see the quality jump out at you in terms of the resolution and the detail that we can provide to mission planners, scientists, etc. And there's also been some really interesting photography that we've done of our EDL debris on the surface of Mars. So what you're looking at is the final bit of, or part of the final bits of our EDL system. There's a back cone and a parachute. And after it deployed the sky crane, which is a wonderful miracle of engineering that you should all Google offline or immediately after this presentation, this is what delivers the sky crane and the rover into a certain velocity profile. And we couldn't give up the opportunity to take images of it. There's also some engineering benefit to understanding how much charring there was on this debris, which may feed into future changes and advancements of how much mass do we invest in this component, right? Can we lightweight it because it's not as charred as we thought it would be, things like that. Let's see if we can get this to play. This was a recent particular win here where we flew in flight 59 all the way up to 20 meters above ground level. I'll try and skip it along here just for time's sake. We went up in discrete jumps, and you can see the helicopter going about 5 meters at a time higher and holding. There was also some scientific interest here to try and characterize the gradient of the horizontal wind speeds at different elevations above the ground. Right, you can imagine the higher you go, the wind speeds may increase, and we have a lot of theories about what that gradient looks like. But hey, you could actually use a helicopter to be a relatively decent wind vane, right? And try and understand at least the magnitude of that. You can also pull out the direction of that wind based off of the controller effort from the helicopter itself. A lot of data science that obviously needs to go into that, a lot of estimation, but we couldn't give up the unique opportunity to try out that theory. Keep moving along here. So what does this mean for the future? SRH, I'll define that acronym here in a second, but let's just talk about what Ingenuity has done. We've proven that the coaxial helicopter design is robust, right? There's no one can question, will it last, right? She's lasted about 30 times longer than we had originally hoped. I guess it depends if you want to count from flight, from sole lifetime or for number of flights, but we've planned for 30 sols on Mars, and we've been alive for about 1,000. We've now, and this chart's out of date. I also want to mention it's difficult to keep these charts constantly up to date with the total multipliers, but we've flown more than 700 meters. 1 kilometer is probably within the capability of Ingenuity. We just haven't done it yet. We've proven that humans on the ground can plan and execute flights up to like a 3 sol per flight cadence, and that the architecture enables resiliency and adaptability. For those of you who have Samsung or Galaxy style phones that had a Qualcomm Snapdragon 801 processor chip inside of it back in 2015, if you had a Samsung S5, for example, we have that same chip, the Snapdragon 801 on board, and it's a powerhouse of capability when you stack it up and compare it to the almost 20 or 30-year-old architecture of avionics on board the rovers, for example, right, which have RAD 750s. Those are old PowerPC-based designs. So this is a supercomputer in comparison to those. That means you can leverage a multi-core compute, right? You can leverage, there's GPUs on there. There are high-performance microcontrollers. So you can do a lot more from an autonomy perspective, but also you have the ability to upgrade very easily and really expand capability. You just need to, update your Python code, your C code here on the ground, send it up through the DSN, and now you have a newly functioning helicopter on the surface. For the future, next set, I'll be brief here. We're working on the next set of helicopters called the Sample Recovery Helicopters. It's for Mars sample return. It's a multi-mission campaign here where the Mars Perseverance mission was the first part, Mars 2020, and then the second part is to get these tubes back home, right? And there's going to be a lander, the sample retrieval lander, on board of which we're planning to have 2 helicopters, which will be a backup method to get these gems here on the right-hand side. These are the sample tubes, inside of which is about 100 grams of rock, 50 grams of rock inside of there. The primary path is that the Perseverance rover will drive up to the sample retrieval lander, one at a time, hand off those tubes. And what our team is working on is the backup, scenario 2, right? So if there's an issue and Perseverance cannot deliver those tubes, then the helicopters will go fetch the 10 tubes on the ground already. I mentioned in that red circle, the 3 Forks cache. That's what our challenge is. So the idea is we take Ingenuity, we add 4 wheels and an arm, and pick up some tubes, excuse me. I'll breeze through these charts because I want to save some time for you all for Q&A. But that's what our team is working on for the sample recovery helicopters. Again, same idea. We start with Ingenuity and develop off of that. It's still a coaxial helicopter. We're scaling up the mass, and these charts are actually a little bit out of date in terms of the engineering deltas. But I want you to all be aware of what's coming down the pike. We'll keep moving. Here's just a fun video. I'm not sure if this audio will transfer over the Zoom or not. Our test team, just as of this past September, took our newest airfoil blade design, tested it inside of a chamber, and pushed it to 0.95 Mach. So expanded the state of the art for this low Reynolds number regime and how far into stall you can push one of these rotor systems and still produce lift. We'll keep moving. Just a picture of our fantastic test team there in one of those carbon fiber blades that we've built. And I think there's time enough for just one quick video here I'll play. This is an even further looking future concept called Mars Science Hexacopter. This aircraft is the size of a truck, the size of the 2020 rover itself. The idea is that in the future, instead of tech demo little add-on, this would be the thing we send on the rocket, right? In order to enable access to areas that rovers can't get to, right? This aircraft is supposed to be around 35 kilos, and the idea is that we can carry up to 5 kilos of science payload and fold up inside of an air shell for EDL. I'll play this video, and just so you all can understand the dream here of fleets of this sort of aircraft flying around on Mars. And while that happens, Dan, I'm happy to start fielding questions.
Okay, Teddy, that was fascinating, and the video right here is equally amazing. Question I have right off the bat, you were talking about flying to higher altitudes, things like that. Are you I don't want to say you're trying to exceed your flight envelopes or your technology, but are you trying to see, what limits you do have with the Ingenuity?
That's absolutely what we've been doing with Ingenuity in the last 6 months, is really pushing the flight envelope, right? We pushed it in airspeed. Well, ground speed, we can't quite know 100% what the airspeed is because we don't have a good airspeed sensor on the ground. But in terms of the planned ground speed, we've pushed it from 5.5 meters a second to 6, and most recently 10, right? There was a question of would that work, and we simulated it. We did our homework, and we thought it would. But again, a test is worth 1,000 theories, and we were able to now cash that in for the future. So it's airspeed, it's controllability, pushing the ceiling again from 5 meters AGL to 10, 15, up to 20, 24 meters AGL. It's all about pushing those limits. Each one of those has risks, right? But we're also 2.5 years into a tech demo mission where it's justified to accept some risk to push the envelope that much further, right? And that's the magic sauce there, is how do you carefully navigate that balance of take on a little more risk, prove a little more capability, and trying to squeeze as much of that out as we can.
Alvin is asking, when climbing to altitude to check the wind gradient, did it or could it check the air density gradient?
Theoretically, you could do something like that, right? It comes down to signal to noise ratio, right? You can back out from your controller effort, as you climb. If you need more and more collective for each discrete jump in altitude, you can make an assessment about, well, if I need to push the rotor harder, that must mean that the density has dropped. We need to be a little bit careful there because there's also a temperature gradient, right? And the temperature of the air affects the density, and then you also just have your seasonal pressure gradients as well. So hypothetically, there's a lot you could do in terms of digging into the data, and I look forward to PhD theses being written about this and people trying to come up with really great results. But it's all still fresh, and it's going to require interested scientists to dig into it.
We've got a couple of questions from Alistair. To what extent has the camera performance, especially the color camera on Ingenuity, degraded over the period?
It has not. The color camera is doing fantastically well. What has occurred is there's fine dust on the windows, right? You can, and all of you can go look at the Mars 2020 raw images website. As soon as the data hits the ground, as soon as our team sees images, it instantly gets pushed to the public server. And you can go on, for interested folks, you can go and compare. They're called the return to Earth. Return to Earth are the color ones. You can look at the return to Earth images, the RT images from Flight 1 to Flight 66, and try and compare, how vivid are these images? How does the color contrast look? And make an assessment for yourself. From my perspective, the image sensor itself, the camera hardware itself, is working just as well as it was in the first haul. It's just a question of, is there some dust on the outside? Might there have been some dust that got into the inside of the window? And is that, attenuating the vibrancy of the image? Perhaps, but the camera itself is still working perfectly fine.
I think you already answered his question about the blades or the control mechanisms working well as well. Do you think, you mentioned the thick, soupy jello of the Earth's atmosphere, do you think that this technology that you've developed for Mars will have applications here on Earth now?
I think I would split it up into two buckets. There's the aerodynamics of it, right, and the extreme hardcore engineering that goes into designing control systems that can stabilize an immensely unstable aircraft in a very low density environment. And then there's the robotics aspect of it, right, which is probably familiar to most people who just go out to the mall and buy a drone and say, oh, the drone flies on its own, great, right? You can go and get a commercial off-the-shelf drone that does that. There's a lot of things that Ingenuity does and is able to do that commercial drones can't, from an autonomy perspective or from a robustness perspective, right? But part of that also had to do with the physics challenges of keeping it lightweight, keeping it able to survive overnight in temperatures that go down to negative 95 degrees Celsius, right? Your mall drone doesn't need to do that. On the aerodynamics front, so there are a lot of robotic, to answer that question, on the robotics front, I think there are a lot of applicability to robotic challenges here on Earth, whether it's airborne, whether it's ground-based, whether it's underwater, that yes, you could port those solutions over from the hardware, from the avionics, the software, GNC, you name it. On the aerodynamics front, that's a little more specialized, right? So for that specific Reynolds, regime, yeah, at 100,000 feet, you can map some of these aerodynamics lessons learned over, and it's really just goes to the fluid dynamics of it, right? What regimes might these airfoils, be used in Earth? There's a handful, right? Not the ones that we're all similar and experience. We're similar to our experience of everyday life, but yes, there could be on the aerodynamics front.
Okay, I know we're right at the limited time. Do you want to try one more question?
Sure. Yeah, go for it.
Gustavo, you mentioned using a couple of commercial off-the-shelf parts on the helicopter. What other parts were off the shelf, and what parts
Sure. Yeah,
did you find that you couldn't use off the shelf?
Yeah. So the COTS parts are all over. I'll just rattle off a few here. Our processor is off the shelf. It was a Snapdragon 801 flight board that any of us could have bought with a credit card back in 2017. It's now discontinued, but if you Google Snapdragon 801 flight board, you'll see the listing online. Our radio system was made by a company called Cyflex that I think were purchased. The hardware is no longer available, but again, there's a Cyflex 900 megahertz, similar to a Zigbee radio. Our FPGA is a Pro ASIC, and our microcontrollers are TI parts. You can go in DigiKey and just buy those. There's nothing special about that. They're expensive, right? But you can just buy them. They're like automotive grade. The FPGA, I think, is the one part of our design which was pre-engineered. It's marketed as I wouldn't say full radiation tolerant, but radiation hardened to give us a better chance on Mars. But again, it's COTS. Any of us can buy it with a credit card on your favorite distributor. Our batteries were just off-the-shelf lithium-ion 18650 batteries. Our solar panel cells were not special built for us. They were commercial off-the-shelf from solar cell manufacturers. The real custom stuff comes down to the hardware of the mechanisms in the aircraft, right? The blades were custom made from our partners at AeroVironment. They really made most of the externals. When you look at Ingenuity, you look from the outside, you see blades, structure, and legs, and a solar panel substrate, right? They make all the carbon fiber and all the composites. All that stuff is custom. The rotor motor was hand wound by one person at that company, right? Because he was trying to get the highest packing efficiency that you can't get from off the shelf. The servos, we took COTS servo mechanisms, but then we also re-engineered them to be for our purpose, for our needs rather, with our swashblade. So a lot of the electronics and avionics, a lot of that was COTS. The aircraft components were really custom.
Well, Teddy, I offer our deepest congratulations on behalf of HAI and the rotorcraft industry on the efforts you guys have made, the work you've accomplished, and it says unbelievable, literally out of this world achievements that you guys have accomplished.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Let's see, Teddy, if we can get you to stop sharing. There we go. Okay. I don't know about you, but that was probably my favorite webinar we've done over the last 3 years now. I think I could follow those updates literally all day long. I'm just trying to get my screen prepared to share here again, just to kind of wrap things up. Unfortunately, we didn't have a lot of time with Teddy, so we're just trying to make do with what we can. And here we go. We try to do these webinars twice a month right now. The schedule could be changing here soon. The webinar we have coming up 1st of December, the early one in December, is going to be cultivating the safety culture from Baldwin Safety. These guys are great about trying to help develop a strong safety culture within your organization. It should be something that we'll really enjoy as well. 2024, we're looking at a variety of topics. Right now, some of the ones I'm working on are trying to plan for heliports and vertiports, what it takes to develop something that's safe and ready to go, especially as advanced air mobility technology moves forward. Looking at some accident investigation webinars, and hopefully just found out about this one, preventing auto rotation mishaps, something that I'm looking forward to as well. If you would like more information, HAI loves to share information, and a couple of ways we do that is through our daily Rotor Daily news aggregator. It's an email that comes directly to you. We search Google on all things helicopter, all things vertical flight, all things rotorcraft, so that you don't have to. We'll send it directly to your inbox. It saves you a ton of time. Rotor Magazine is a quarterly publication, an award-winning quarterly publication. Has some great, longer, in-depth stories that we can't always get in Rotor Daily. And both of those are free. The only charge we have is for the magazine. If you're outside the United States, we do have a small nominal fee for postage. Easiest way to subscribe to those is go to rotor.org/subscribe, and we'll get you signed up for those. HAI is a membership organization. Our webinars are designed for everybody to enjoy. So we want to know what you liked about the webinar and what more we could do, maybe some other topic ideas for the webinar. We'll try to get a questionnaire out to you shortly. Jim Viola, the president of HAI, is always interested to know what you think about how the organization is doing for the industry. So please let Jim know. Send him an email at president@rotor.org with your challenges, with your congratulations, with your questions, any comments you have on how the organization's doing, what more we could be doing, what we've done too much of. If you want us to back away from something, I'm not sure. We are obviously here to serve our members. That does wrap things up for us for this week. That does conclude the webinar. I know it was fast, it was brief, but I felt it was just packed with information. Really do appreciate Teddy's time in coming on to tell us and give us updates on literally what could be changing in our industry here, in the next decade. I just feel like it's got so much potential for here on Earth. So until next time, we ask that you fly safe, you be safe. If you're here in the United States and are going to be celebrating Thanksgiving holiday next week, that you enjoy yourself, enjoy your family. And until then, we will see you again very, very soon.